Ready? Hi everybody, we are here today with Chris and Becky, good friends and clients, and we just met this year in March over in on Fremont on Lake Harriet. In fact, two homes, sold two, bought one together, and we're going to tell the story today because it's an awesome one, and there's so many clients that we meet every single day that I think will be inspired by your story. So thank you for doing this with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a lot of fun in this process. I think, Carrie Ann, as you know, when we met you, we were like, Chris was calling it like we were kicking the tires, like this wasn't even going to be a real thing. I think until we met you, and it was like, oh, maybe this is a real thing.
Push you over the ledge.
Yeah,
right?
push over the ledge. But it was something you said. You said the very first time we met, because we have teenagers, so in our mind we were like, we'll just wait until they're ready to move on and they're in their next life stage. And you were like, but that's not how that really happens.
No.
Right? They either maybe don't go right away, or they're going to be back. When they come back, they're going to be bringing their friends and their partners and their people. And do
That's
you want
right.
to have your life set up in a way that's like accommodating to that, or that's just accommodating to the two of you? And you and
That's
I talked
exactly
about
what we
this.
said.
Yeah, you and I talked about this a couple months ago, that really we love them, but we like them. Like we want them to come home, and we want them to have a place that they feel grounded in. So it was sort of like, well, maybe now is the right time. And that's when we met you, and we thought, okay, well, maybe we should take this a little more seriously.
So for people out there that are in second relationships, right? You divorce and then you couple again. How long were you together before you started thinking, how long do we want to be in two separate homes? Like, when was the trigger point? Not that it's going to be the same for everybody, but just for you, when was that?
It was like 3 weeks. No, it was, I don't know. It was like,
That's
it was a
awesome.
couple of years, but I remember we looked at a house early, and that was just way too early.
Yeah.
But we kind of toyed with the idea. I think probably when we met you, I think
It was like
we
in
were,
March.
that's probably when we first started seriously considering it.
Yeah.
Well, you also have this, like, you're going back and forth between
Yeah.
two houses all the
Yeah.
time. And I think that started to get, like, you kind of feel like you're living in partial places, and you ended up sacrificing time with the kids to be able to come and stay at my house. And then we kind of always had to stay at my house. And so
Right.
it just felt like unmanageable. Like, what are we doing? Like, this just doesn't feel
It's
good.
a real thing. The time management when you're trying to couple and you're adults, right? And you've got kids that are teenagers and they've got activities and responsibilities. It feels like you're in this triangle and trying to manage the time. So we started looking together. It took a couple months. And we looked at renovations and we looked at completed homes. So I think the two of you are brilliant, like the collaboration and just the ability to kind of weave into each other's psyche and kind of read each other and be willing to make sacrifices, right? Give and take was absolutely a part of coupling into one home. So what would be the number one targeted, like what was the thing that really drove both of you when you were looking for the search?
I mean, part of it, I don't know that there was one thing. I mean, if there was one thing that drove it, it was really finding a way to make our lives feel more manageable and less hectic, right? Like, how do we start to really combine our lives and do this together versus trying to each fit into each other's lives? Like, that just wasn't feeling good anymore. And I think in terms of houses, there was a lot of, as you know, like, we had a long list of sort of like must-haves in order for this to logistically work for us, and those were location, those were like just the space in the house that needed to accommodate to make sure that everyone felt really comfortable. And then I think there was just the aesthetics of like, can we find a place that feels representative of both of our styles? And that was maybe, all three of those, we felt like this was going to be a big challenge. I told Chris, like, this is going to take forever. Like, we're never going to find this place. And like, we looked at a lot of places with you, but it was just like nothing was quite right. And it's funny how then, like, I don't know, a month in, you're
got
like,
super
here
targeted. You get really clear on what you want, and then it's like laser focus on finding it. For you, Chris, it was a much more, well, I call it dramatic, because that was your life home with the kids, and you were in that home for 20 plus years. So that was a big decision for you.
Well, yeah, I don't think it was that, like, it was more for the kids, because that's the house they grew up in.
Yeah.
So they never, they lived in that house since birth.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that hard of a time, I think, leaving that house. I think the finding a house was probably more challenging, and which one's going to work for both of us. I think I had probably I could have found a lot more houses, so it was finding that one that we both liked.
Yeah.
So this one's, you know, we walked in and liked this one.
So as the parent, because there's a lot of parents out there that struggle with this, leaving the childhood home, what would be your one piece of advice to parents that decide they're going through this life transition and they're prepared to sell that home and move on to the next phase?
Well, I was getting a lot of input from the girls.
Yeah.
So we talked about it, and at first, I mean, early on when we started the idea, I mean, there were a lot of fits and starts, you know, that were like, yep, this is going to be a good idea, and then nope, we're not moving. Like, this is, you know, we want to like live in this house until we graduate. So I thought like there were moments where I thought this is never going to work. But then we just kept talking about it, socializing it, and I think they came around, and you know, when we went to look at some houses and had their input into that, then I think they got their heads around the idea that this could be okay.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, it's a lot of discussion.
A lot of discussion, and I think the three of us, as we were talking about it, when bringing the kids into the equation, making it exciting for them.
Yeah.
You know, finding something that they can relate to that's really a happy thing, so they can focus on what this looks like in the future, because it's really easy as a young person to get caught up and rooted in what you know and you're comfortable with, and your home is comfort, and your parents are comfort, and when you're entertaining a new family unit and combining households, that can be uncomfortable, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So figuring out as parents how to do that, that's why I love the idea of having these interviews with my couples that are coupling midlife with children, because a lot of people struggle with this and it holds back their life because of it.
Yeah, I think involving them in the process was critical, because that really was the turning point for us, is exactly what you said. Like when they started to get excited and we would go out to dinner together and they're like, well, where are we gonna do this and how would we do this? And even if it wasn't the house that we were gonna pick, just like being a part of the process and seeing the energy that they were putting behind it, and it was like, okay, maybe we can do this, because I don't think we really thought it was probably possible until we started to see their involvement, and like they were bringing it up, and that it wasn't just, we weren't just pushing it. And I think they also saw the benefit too of, you know, at the end of the day, it's like they do get more time with their dad, because he's not having to divide attention or like drive back and forth. It's like this actually will result in more time together. Right? And I think like that once that started to become clear and you could kind of see it a little bit, you could kind of see yourself in the situation, I think it really changed the conversation.
Also really lucky too as far as like school, so you know, their mom lives in neighborhood where the school is, so, and it's not like the distance isn't very far, very familiar with this neighborhood already.
Right.
So we were pretty lucky in terms of like we didn't live that far apart, so the compromise neighborhood was like pretty easy to zero in on, and they've got their driver's license, so it's, and, I mean, so for them it wasn't like they're not very far away from their friends, they're not very far from their school, so that all made life a lot easier.
Well, and you were really clear about that going into it. So I think the advice to everybody is being really clear on identifying when you're commingling families with children, identifying that location, being super clear on that, being super clear on your budget and what you're comfortable with. So it makes it easier on the end, because you don't want that stress, right? And we made that we were very clear about that when we were looking at budgets for renovation versus not. And being aware of what the market feels like right now as it relates to renovating. And what kind of stress does that add to the equation?
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that having something that's fairly close to turnkey was a huge advantage to you.
As much as I love a good house project, you're totally right. I was going to say, I think one of the other things too that was important with the kids in terms of advice for other people would be understanding what their fears are in it. Because I think you were great about having a lot of conversations, and in that some of the things that they were worried about weren't real, like you're surprised, like, why would you be worried about that? But it's like, we didn't know, because it's the unknown, right? So I feel like you did a good job of uncovering some of those things. Like, I'm really weird about cleaning and OCD, and what's that going to look like when we're living together? And it's like, okay, these are things we can solve, right? Like, these are really solvable things, right?
Yeah, and that's inevitable. Like when you're coupling, there's always going to be things. It's impossible to have a clean slate and not have things that are going to, you know, not be copacetic. Those are all solvable if you want them to be. So what would be your number one piece of advice to those that are ready for a life transition and want to take 2 households and merge into one, what's your number one thing, your number one piece of advice?
Like you're zooming in on this one. It's a lot of pressure. I mean, I think the biggest thing was a lot of transparency and communication.
That's a great
I think the price, I mean, you really have to, like, everything's got to be on the table, right? Like all of the uncomfortable conversations, and we had a lot of them, and they didn't all go well, but it was like, well, we have to have these now before we make this decision. So I think the transparency and communication around all of the sensitive topics, nothing was off the table, was really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just communication.
Yeah, completely that. So now that you're here, are you ever moving again?
Never.
I don't know.
Never. He's like, maybe.
Other than
Not for a while. The
Well, you know,
the
he was in
moving
Europe for
process.
most of
No, I
the
mean the moving
parts of the
process
move.
definitely sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
like just not fun.
Yeah.
well, I think that
It's-
I always say you cannot fully take the suck out of a move. Like it is a real thing, right? But we can try to take as much pain out of it as possible and put a team around it.
Yeah.
We've got a great piece with Chris's house because we'll just have to say quickly, it's called 20 years in 5 days, which is literally what we did. We put you on a plane and you gave us the grace to bring in a support system. And would you tell everybody, please, how lovely that was to walk home, walk into your home?
I would say I don't know how lovely. I would say it was money well spent. I know when I got the estimate on the work that
You
they
were
were going to
choking,
do,
yeah.
I was like, you got to be kidding me. Let's just wait 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and like I can deal with some of this when I get back. But that was money well spent. That was you know, that was great. I'd have to say, like, living in a model home after moving back, like getting back and wanting to, you know, get into your bed and there are no sheets on your bed. Like, is that great? So living in a model home, like, you know, when we threw away all my furniture for like a month or two, that kind of sucked. Like, but it was having.
But we got rid of it.
Oh no, we got rid of it quickly. Super happy with the way that sale went. That was like super smooth. And then having to see where, you know, Becky did more work on her own because her place just was in a different state than mine was.
Right.
Like even in her place was in a much better state, but it was a ton of work. And like I was just
It
trying to
always
like
is.
after seeing that, like I would have never gotten there. Like so
I
happy
think
to have written that check out.
Yeah.
and pitched a lot of that stuff, like, you know,
It made the process a lot
it was
easier.
great, yeah, because like
Yeah.
we were living there forever. There was so much junk everywhere in the basement, the garage. It was like
20 plus years, that's a magic number out there for the empty nesters. It's a long time. And when you're raising kids, you are no different than everyone else out there. And when we show the before and afters and show the efficiency in it, when you look at the value of your time, your personal time and your sanity, like your psyche, I can't stress enough how important it is to put a team around that and rip that Band-Aid off when you know you're going to make that move. Because it can take people months to get to where you got in 5 days.
Oh, it was
Months.
incredible.
It's
I mean, the
incredible.
transformation was incredible. And then coming back, and like Chris said, my house was an easier lift, but it was still a lift. I had been there 13 years, so there was still quite a bit of stuff to go through. And every day I was like, aren't you glad? Like, aren't you so glad that you're not having to go? You didn't have to go through this. And he was like, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I mean,
It was
when you're
worth it.
touching every single thing you own, we talked about that. There's something very cathartic about really looking at what you have and do I need this anymore? I think we all need to do that more often than we do. Really being mindful. We had even visited about this, about the annual purge.
Yes.
Instead of making it a decade
There needs
purge,
to be.
an annual purge. That would be the best piece of advice to everybody on this.
Oh, the closet purge, you know, was like one
Yeah.
of the hardest things for me, was like going through everything and making some hard decisions.
I would say in hindsight, I wish we would have purged more because we're still purging. Like,
yeah,
it
we're
was
still
like,
purging.
There's not. I mean, you still make the move, and it's like we brought over so much stuff. That just,
I
now
can't
we need
believe
to
I
pitch it.
packed
So
that.
we had to pack it. We moved it. And now we got to pitch it.
You got to pitch
It's
it
like, we should
again.
have pitched
It's
more.
inevitable. It is part of it. Well, I think you're a brilliant story, and I think that anyone will find some value. And like it's a nugget and a voice of encouragement that it can be done. And you were beautiful example of that. So thank you.
Yes,
Really,
well, thank
truly,
you.
so much fun.
Yeah.
to
We had a
work
lot
with
of
the
fun
two
in
of
the
you.
process. It was great. It was fun watching the two of you debate and dialogue over a lot of the details of the house, but we had a great time. and-
Becky
I
gets
love that.
lots of entertainment.
Oh, I do. I was so
Love
entertained.
to talk about our interactions.
It was so entertaining, but we had a lot of fun, and your team, I've told you before, you have an amazing support team that
Thank
just
you.
really made I felt like I didn't have to worry about anything. You
Thank
guys
you.
were all over it and so responsive and helpful and knowledgeable.
appreciate
So
that.
it was a great experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris and Becky, everybody. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.